I'm pleased to introduce our senior tech panel led by Walter Greenleaf. I believe that the panelists will introduce themselves.
Yes, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to self-introduce. Maybe we could start with Erica and work our way towards me. Please let us know, in addition to what you're working on, and we've had a chance to get a feeling for that from you already, Erica, what you're most excited about in terms of something outside of work. Just any story, anything that nobody knows about you or would know about you reading your bio that you feel to disclose. You could even make it up, but...
Choose column B, that's good. So I'm Erica Ross. I'm not going to talk too much about what I do at Abbott, because I think I just did. But before Abbott, I was at a company called Cala Health, which is a startup company that came out of the Stanford biodesign program. And I was there for 2.5 years, kind of creating a data science team and a neural engineering team for the company to really drive the neuroscience behind non-invasive neuromodulation to treat hand tremor and really start building out a pipeline of new practice areas for the company and different non-invasive stimulation targets. Before that, I was an assistant professor in neurosurgery at the Mayo Clinic, working on a couple DARPA contracts for the targeted neuroplasticity training program, so memory-related neuromodulation in mostly preclinical, actually exclusively in preclinical models. I don't know, I guess I feel very passionate about that. that I think diet and exercise could probably put us all out of this room. So the more we can get tools to help encourage those things while also delivering medicines in different ways, shapes, and forms, I think will really take what we can do for people and move it to the next level, which is where I think the opportunity for digital health really lies.
Hi, I'm Noah Falstein, and I tend to be the odd one out in these groups because I'm a very long-time video game designer, and happy to say that it's something that is becoming less and less unusual because, of course, we're seeing, particularly with some of the VR, how the techniques that we as game designers, game developers have used are becoming useful. But I spent many years doing entertainment games. I was with LucasArts Entertainment when they were just starting up, and worked on arcade games before that, and DreamWorks Interactive. I was more recently the chief game designer at Google for 4 years and worked with their VR and AR groups. But I left there a couple of years ago, partly because I had gotten so interested before I joined Google in the overlap of neuroscience and health and games and how those are so mutually supportive and informing each other. And it's something I'm happy to see just exploding recently. And I'm working with MindMaze, and they're doing stroke rehabilitation and some other interesting cognitive ways of having hardware design to help do biomonitoring. Also working with companies like Achille Interactive, Level X, many others that are in this overlap of the way games and medicine work together, and often with very positive outcomes. As far as new trends, I think for a wearables conference, I'd say that one of the things I'm excited about, I spent a year when I was at Google wearing Google Glass and getting strange stares, and somebody said, it's kind of like being a celebrity. And I said, well, no, it's more like wearing a celebrity on your face, and you get to take it off when you get too much attention. But I do believe that eye tracking and something that looks a little less like a science fiction gadget, but more like eyeglasses that allows us to do eye tracking and probably augmented or extended reality of some sort is going to be another one of those things that overlaps between the entertainment side of things and health. And I've seen some wonderful applications in both of those areas using that sort of technology.
Hi, I'm Nathan Intrator. I'm the founder of Neurosteer. Before that, I was at Brown University and Tel Aviv University for many years. studying the brain. My background is mathematics, so I was studying the brain using advanced mathematics, and which I think is the way to study the brain, by the way. And at some point I realized that some mathematical theory that I'm familiar with could actually change the way we analyze the brain, and I felt I had to leave the academia and go and do that, which is what I'm doing now. I'm excited about the abilities of exciting and modifying the brain and finding ways to really modify the brain in ways that have not been done before. We are working a lot with coma patients and with severe disabilities, and it turns out that there are ways to stimulate brainstem cells to actually grow and actually kind of partially heal the brain. And we are very excited about things like this, in addition to the stuff that we are doing on a daily basis, which I'll talk about at my presentation at 4. I think that's it. If we are talking about sensors, which is what this beautiful conference is about, all these new miniature chemical, electrical, organic sensors, I think can really make a huge change in the ability to read the brain. And I think rather than getting our mind tired from things that we can use AI to help us, I'm trying to have AI work for us and help our brain in various ways, namely detect and then stimulate and facilitate much better brain activity. So I'm excited not about the smart machines that will be around us, but about the smart people that we will become by being aided by those smart machines.
And keeping with our theme of aging and senior care, we may need it as we get older. Amir?
I'm a founder and CEO of a company called Sixth Sense Enterprises. Sixth Sense has been, for the past 12 years, developing immersive solutions that exclusively focus on improving people's life. I'll go back to some story where the product you've seen Joel talking about, that we just launched with Penumbra, was designed to provide rehabilitation in a more effective way as a tool to make rehabilitation more effective in the hands of health care providers. And my story really starts back in '83 when I was injured in some military exercise in Lebanon, and found myself awake, locked or tied to a bed, facing the ceiling and counting the dots in the ceiling tiles for about 3 weeks as I'm trying to find answers to why my leg is basically paralyzed. And following that, for 2.5 years in a place that you might recognize, Tel HaShomer, Rehabilitation B, spent 2.5 years with a therapist that the only way that he was able to make me believe that I have a chance to get myself back into a similar place where I went to. At that point, I'm a 19-year-old kid, 20, almost 20 then, was believe me. Just believe me, I know what I'm doing, just believe me. I cannot show you anything. I cannot show you the data, I cannot explain you why. You just have to trust me, I've been doing it for many, many years. But there's nothing beyond the deep experience that, his name was Moses. He was a legend in the military rehab. And when I was doing rehab, I saw many additional soldiers in many different injuries, and some of them had injuries that were much worse than mine. I was able to recoup my right leg came back, and I've been doing rehab since then, and it's almost 40 years. But that inspired me to, I was very frustrated, and it inspired me to believe that there's a better way technology can enable us to both the patient and for the therapist to provide the data that is necessary for me to understand and see that there's progress, that I'm to see the light, to believe. Because if you don't believe, it doesn't matter how capable are the health professionals, you will not be able to make it. And it's not just for, rehabilitation from, physical injury like mine. It's true for stroke, it's true for, it's true for any process of rehab. So I went on a subconsciously first, but then consciously from the 90s, early 90s, 89 actually, a few years after Walter started that. I was slightly late. I started chasing that dream. I figured all technologies. I went all over the world, especially between Israel, because a lot of military technologies in Israel were very useful. And then, of course, came to the US. And the bottom line is I started making immersive technologies that will allow to track the body. So both myself and patients like I was, and most importantly, the health providers will be able to provide themselves and plan a better plan for me. As Walter said earlier, we are an individual, as patients, we are individuals, and if there's more data, then the therapy, the health care can be directed at me, but we need to provide the health providers the data. And then in 2007, I've been doing it from '94. I did my first VR experience. It was a military simulator, helping soldiers remove the risk of using live ammunition and specifically grenades in door-to-door training. And that's how I was introduced by the US Navy to VR. And from that point, I said that's what's going to get us to be able to at least provide the rehab, going back to my main passion. And then teaming with a very close friend that was at that time making a big career for himself. His name is also an Israeli, Avi Arad. He was then the CEO, or became a little later the CEO of Marvel, producing Spider-Man and Iron Man and X-Men and all these superheroes. He was by far the most imaginative, a genius of creating immersive content. And the combination of his capabilities of making immersive storytelling and my understanding of the technology that takes to bring the person into the experience had us launch in 2007 Sixth Sense with the mission of immersing people into that experience that they can engage their intuition. If you can make people believe to the extent that they can engage all those, everything they learned in reality, and take it beyond that, beyond the limitation of reality, you can become that superhero that's going to beat stroke and many other diseases. And for that reason, we started by launching this first product with an amazing company called Penumbra, which is a traditional medical device company. And then, I'm stopping right now. And then we are taking the same technology across the board to solve many, many critical problems that society have. And I think, it's a great beginning. And Walter is one of those, like Jeremy Bellinson and others, that inspired me when I came to this country to see the work he's done and his colleagues.
I actually wasn't going to cut you off because I do think you are an example of a success story, and by bringing in a large medical device company to this emerging field, it's been a real contribution. But I do want to talk about senior care, and I want to have our other panelists also expand upon your thinking about how your expertise maps to the challenges of an aging population. One of the groups that I've worked with before, a company with a very boring name called Direct Supply, sells to 80% of the senior care market. And they're designing and building 3,000 new facilities a year. and they're helping refurbish another 6,000 to 10,000 facilities for senior care. And it's not enough, and that's just in the US. So the silver wave, as it's calling, the silver tsunami is coming. It's going to dramatically impact our culture, our society, and we're not ready for it. And again, as I mentioned earlier during my talk, I think the only solution is for us to muscle up and really expand what we're doing with sensors and analytics and services and technology that can help people age in place, et cetera. So each of you, I'd love to hear how you think your knowledge and your passion can help address this huge problem. Maybe Erica, you could start.
I think for this, I'll talk a little bit more about our work in deep brain stimulation rather than spinal cord stimulation. So we have a deep brain stimulator as well that we have approved to treat folks with Parkinson's disease, and that's a more elderly population than folks with chronic pain typically. I think one of the major challenges for our field, for neuromodulation and movement disorder neurologists in particular, is access and making sure that the right patients are seeing the right folks to get the right kind of devices and then get them programmed in the right way, because it is a very, very time-consuming process and it requires a lot of expertise right now. And so the ways that we're looking at that are really to build efficiency in for the healthcare provider and for the patients involved. Once the device is set and ready to go, it's actually a system that doesn't need a lot of upkeep, which is good for some of the challenges that I think we'll face in trying to provide healthcare for the aging population. But the initial setting process is going to require some innovation to make sure that we get everything set up the right way, and we're spending a lot of time and energy building ways to create that access for folks in the system.
I know you haven't been at Abbott for an extremely long time, but does Abbott talk about the challenge of providing and the importance of providing technology to address an aging population?
Every day.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, every day. It's central to a lot of the work that we're doing in the research and development team, making sure that the decisions that we are making are patient-centric, because ultimately it doesn't matter if we don't create something that's going to help the population of people and the growing population of people who could benefit from it.
And no, I think your expertise, and I'd love to hear you expand a little bit on some of the adventures you've had, and maybe talk a little bit about the overused phrase gamification and why it's not necessarily the best phrase to have floating around. But I think as we deal with the challenges of an aging population, motivating people, especially with the comorbid problems of depression and anxiety that are present in isolation in an aging population, how can we leverage the expertise from the gaming zone to help make aging in place and medical care a little bit more engaging for people?
Yeah, well, there are so many different angles to come at that from, and given what I've been hearing today, actually Erica's talk was very inspiring to me, because I think one of the places where games and medical treatment on a lot of levels come together that applies to pretty much every age as well is attention. And so many of, certainly when it comes to pain remediation, but also to things like depression and ADHD, obviously, attention is really at the core of that. And in the games industry, we've been spending many decades learning how to capture people's attention, keep it going, and also working with just a very huge population that when I started doing this, people would tend to think of games as something that kids would do, or maybe young adults at the most. And even now I get people who will say, oh, I don't play games. And I say, well, don't I see Candy Crush on your phone? So, oh, that's just something I do in line or, at night or for an hour or two a day. But that's not really a game. That's just a way I waste time. And I'm really happy to hear that because they don't need to think of it as a game. And what we're doing on the health side, I see part of what I do and what people in my position do is apply what we've used in games to make things interesting to, many of you probably have heard of the flow channel, and there's a really interesting balance that we have to do, a dance between getting bored on the one hand if something's too easy and getting frustrated if it's too hard, and not having some straight line, but almost a sort of vibrato as you go up that path where it gets really tough for a while and then eases off. This is at the heart of so many things that we're interested in as people. And one of the wonderful things, I won't say even just about games, but about interactivity, is that we can vary that both in one person's experience, but also create a single application that can work with a 60-year-old who doesn't think it's a game and a 25-year-old who's recovering from a traumatic injury who is a hardcore game player, and have both of those people be satisfied because it adapts to them as they go. It's one of the things I've always loved about the interactive side of entertainment. And I'm happy to say, it's, as Walter says, gamification, when I hear that word, it bothers me because it's a little bit like, just to flip it around, I'm sure a lot of you have advanced degrees in science, and if as a gamer I said, oh, I'm going to add science to my game, as long as I have like a hypothesis and a couple of buttons you can press, that's science, right? And, well, it kind of is science, but there's a little bit more to it than that, and I feel the same way when people say, well, I'll add a high score table and some badges, and you do have subtleties that we're bringing together from medicine, from the engineering, and certainly from the game and entertainment side that can learn how to apply those things for really good outcomes.
Well, so far we were just talking about rehabilitation of various types, but the best rehabilitation is prevention. So if we can actually detect things early enough, we can prevent. To me, every stroke, every heart attack is basically a failure of the system. And it doesn't happen that a heart attack happens just as, one could never predict what was going on. It's not that you have a healthy heart, healthy cardiac system, cardiorespiratory system, and then suddenly the heart fails. It doesn't really happen. And if you're not sure about that, think about your car or your car 20, 30 years ago, where you could go in the road and get stuck and the engine would kind of burn in the middle of the road. It doesn't happen anymore. Why? Because we put a lot of sensors into this car, and now we get, all sorts of lights, and sometimes someone talking to us, telling us that this is a good time to go to the garage to fix it. And we still have about a week or two to go before the car completely stops. And that's really what we need to do. And to me, gamification is one way to interrogate both the body physically and the brain. We, for example, in Neurotech, we use music a lot to interrogate the brain. And the subjects say that they have been kind of doing this kind of cognitive analysis and actually enjoying it very much. And the music changes it completely from something that feels like not enjoyable to something that is much more enjoyable. So I believe that if we really concentrate more on sensors, if we want to extend the life of people at home, we have to avoid falls, and now there are ways to look and try to detect and predict falls. Sometimes like a blood thinner can actually make the big difference between a heart attack or a stroke and, recovering this night and maybe going the next day for some cardiac procedure that is not after losing your consciousness for 10 minutes. You see, 10 minutes of losing your consciousness can be devastating, both on the heart muscle, which will then be huge rehabilitation of the heart, or on your brain, which will be a recovery from stroke, etc. We really should avoid that completely. So in my mind, the hospitals, the role of hospitals in the future will be totally different than today. And maybe there will be no need for surgeons almost,
So we our, I was just talking to Walter outside about our roadmap and where we are going. So I 100% agree with Nathan's, thank you, Nathan's direction. First, I'll tell you one thing that you said two things that are very important to me. One is the guidance we are getting from all the neuro experts, the neurologists and psychiatrists and many different scientists that we've been engaging for the past 10 years since my first attempt on a rehab system in 2009. Music is another way to allow the brain to bridge those areas that got hurt, got disconnected, and to reroute. And we are developing right now another application that's going to allow to run on the same system to allow you both with music and allow you to regain what we found, which is very interesting, that people that lost their ability to speak can say the same by singing, because it's just happens to be a different part of the brain that controls that part. And with that, eventually they can learn, go back and use that same area to actually speak. But wellness, prevention of the stroke, it all comes down to data. It comes down to how we're going to provide the health industry, the healthcare providers, how we're going to provide them with the data that they need to prevent us from going into a stroke, a heart attack, and all that. And the wellness side of it is our next step. Is where we're going to provide the tools that's going to enable both the aging population. Direct Supply is a magical company. And what Walter is mentioning, I urge anybody that wants to help that population to really learn about Direct Supply, because they are, again, 80% of the market, and they have people in there that really care and really are innovative and far pioneering in their interest, although they are looking for technology companies, they're looking for scientists that can help them, and Walter is definitely able to guide you how to work with them like he did with us. But the point is, creating a system that's going to enable the health industry to get more data about the population, that's going to allow them to learn about the patient and potentially provide them the type of wellness, proactive exercises or proactive therapies that's going to enable the prevention of those terrible diseases. That's by far the next and most important goal for all of us to take.
I agree, and I'm very much looking forward to the time where we don't say e-health or digital health or computer-aided health, we just say health. And that the fact that we're measuring things and analyzing them is just part of healthcare. Right now it's still a little bit exciting when somebody rolls in with a suitcase full of a VR system, but even just bringing a smartphone to healthcare now can be a challenge.
I just wanted to throw in, I think Nathan had a similar kind of thought, but I was just thinking earlier about how 20 years ago we used to talk about camera phones, and now it's like, of course there's a camera in your phone, a similar kind of thing.
One thing we haven't talked about yet is the issue of behavioral health and mental health in our senior population, really in our population at large, but in particular, it's isolation, depression can be a big risk factor for people as they age, especially when there's severe health problems like chronic pain or a stroke or a mobility disorder. What are your thoughts? And again, it can be beyond your specific business opportunity, but what are your thoughts about how we can address the mental health challenges of an aging population?
I mean, I think it comes down to tracking objective measures so you can see time to wellness when you have a therapy that is effective. We had a trial a while back that was not successful in depression. It's something that we're continuing to explore in different ways, shapes, and forms. But it is a difficult population to understand and to be able to provide the right kind of health care if you don't see what's happening at home. And so I think it provides a really nice opportunity for integration of a lot of the tools and technologies that are being discussed today.
Well, it's an interesting question. I guess the first thing that comes to mind for me is socialization, but digital socialization, in the sense that we don't actually have to necessarily be physically in the same place, or when it comes to something like depression, you can deal with a digital solution as an individual, as an introvert, or as somebody who just doesn't want to deal with anyone else, and it can very gently connect you with other people, even as you're not leaving your bedroom. And there are so many interesting ways now that the technology is enabling us to communicate with others and cooperate, compete with them, just generally communicate with them in such a variety of ways that are both entertaining and can also help with the preventative care, because if you can keep somebody connected, they're much less likely to go down some of these pathways that end up in ill health.
Right, and Amir, I think you were describing to me a system where the concept was that your mother in Israel could take her granddaughter shopping in Florence, Italy, if we leverage the right sort of technology to allow people to do virtual shopping.
Yeah. My mom, unfortunately, is a very advanced heart condition that does not allow her to get on a plane. And my daughter, even past that level of shopping, my daughter graduated college, and my mom obviously wanted to be at her grandchild's graduation and obviously could not travel. She's, of course, based in Israel. My daughter was in Cambridge. So that was my mom's idea, because she knew what I'm doing. And my daughter graduated last May. So she basically already seen VR, experienced VR. She's 84. She says, "Can't you have me experience the graduation of Liat, my daughter?" And I told her, it's already possible, meaning that is possible right this minute. This minute you can go actually also shopping, although shopping is not that easy, but to do those family events where people are distributed all over the world and be part of the same is right now available for multiple companies. Specifically, Oculus is making some steps towards that. I think that's in their core message of enable 1 billion people to share the platform. I think Oculus is going to be the one that's going to enable a lot of those most important value propositions and allow to connect the world in a way that people are going to be at the same place at the same time. I want to give you two things that on mental health is happening. And there are some amazing people that are doing it, and it's very important to follow their work. There's one in USC, a good friend of Walter's, and I am quite a fan of his. He's also a veteran. Skip at USC has been taking care of veterans with PTSD for many, many years before Oculus, before anything, for more than 20 years. The work that is being done and the work that can be done, and I speak as a veteran, I can tell you it's unbelievable, where it's all about being able to recreate in a very gradual and controlled manner that traumatic experience that causes you that mental condition. And for PTSD, immersive solutions are making amazing contribution already, and the data is unbelievably supportive to how effective it is, how more effective it is than almost anything else. But there's another one, I'm very focused on helping on the veteran side of things, but I can say other people that are doing amazing works is with this scary social tragedy we have with 500,000 homeless people in this country, which unfortunately I found out about it because a lot of them are veterans. And that's beyond belief. And those are all or mostly because of mental condition. And I believe that there's going to be possibly, again, I'm not taking it on us, on myself, but if anybody finds themselves in a company or in a opportunity to help, but if we can somehow reach out to that community and provide them this immersive therapy, which is basically, it's all about the elasticity of the brain. It all comes down to that, helping the brain to see, a better way to go beyond the reality.
And Nathan, I know you have a perspective on this.
So I think we kind of, on this question, we are all in agreement here. So I want to push the envelope a little bit. I think it is really this being isolated and being socially isolated, which of course, when you're physically disabled, makes it much easier to become isolated, is potentially the big problem of less brain stimulation, which then leads to less body stimulation, etc. And I think that maybe not too long from now, we will see some kind of virtual friend become a stronger friend than an actual physical friend. And that virtual friend can be another human being or another non-human being as well. And that person could actually stimulate the elderly or those who have other disabilities, especially mental disabilities, to do things that they would not do otherwise. And in that respect, I think all the extended reality could be extremely useful for this, definitely.
Absolutely, and to get back to our theme of sensor technology and the Internet of Things and measuring behavioral and biological processes, I think one of the field of mental health, psychiatry, psychology, behavioral health, has suffered from having a dearth of analytics for many, many years because we rely on subjective self-report mechanisms. But now we're in a position to change that in a variety of ways. So I think as we move forward, being able to apply, and Nathan, you pointed this out, we need to measure things, and we need to build the analytical engines to help us interpret the wealth of data that's going to be streaming in. If somebody is aging in place and we have sensors in their home, understanding, once they opt in for this sort of feedback and information, I think we can understand a lot and not just do prevention, but also help figure out what is the right pathway to send someone down when they do have a problem. And we're missing that now, but I think there's no reason we can't build that capacity out.
Absolutely. I mean, talking about bipolar or any other disease that, there are big swings, and if you can stop the swing in the middle, and by sometimes it's just making a phone call, all these lines that are helping people that want to commit suicide, etc. We had stories about someone calling, the line was busy, and then they killed themselves, That should not happen. And definitely we should be calling before that happens. So we should be actually really sensing those people in various ways to realize when there's a certain stress developing that should be removed. And of course, those who see friends and family all the time, those friends and family would sense that. But we have to help a lot of people that don't have those friends and family to sense them and to stimulate them to actually still be part of the society. And the virtual reality, taking you from one place to another in a heartbeat, is really what's needed. I'll tell just one story, a very quick one. We had a very famous ALS patient in Israel that, of course, could not move, was in bed, was just communicating with the eyes. And he had a robot going around in the world to different conferences, etc., moving around with a camera, and he would talk through his eyes and voice over text to people and be really connected. And at the time, it seemed like something totally crazy, but I can see those days that people will not want to take off their virtual reality goggles and go back to the real world because there's nothing for them there, you know.
We need to fix that too. You know, with the authority of moderator, I'd like to put someone in the audience on the spot to fill in one of the things we haven't talked about, although you mentioned, which is the role of AI systems in the future. Will we have AI systems that can be our support staff, our companions, that will be robust enough? So is there anyone here who is an expert on AI technology and virtual humans, by any chance? Oh, that's sad. If there's no one who's knowledgeable about AI technology enough to speak about. Okay, all right, I'm putting you on the spot. How do you think the evolution of AI technology will help support care of our aging seniors?
Yeah, it's not quite fair because I think it's the next the panel. But so the company that I work for in Toronto, we're building digital music therapies, and so we're a lot of the conversation here around entertainment and music and pleasant passive experience to being able to monitor and prescribe. That's what we're building. So we have an AI that monitors the patient, understands how they feel throughout an experience, and then simply predicts and prescribes music in real time to achieve outcomes. And so what we're looking at is using that in anxiety indications. We're studying students at American University, but we think it has applicability in PTSD, bipolar, schizophrenia, a lot of neuropsychiatric spaces. The nice thing about digital health is we can monitor people in real time. We can't do that with a molecule. And so we can change the prescription in real time. And with mental health and all with the AI, it's really a prediction problem. And that's where AI flexes its muscle.
That's wonderful, and I'm looking forward to hearing your talk. You said something very interesting, which was we monitor how people are feeling. So I'm hoping you'll expand on that when you talk. We have a few more minutes for questions. Can we have some questions from the audience? And I think we have all the microphones up here, so just please speak very loud. Oh, there's one back there.
I just have a question for people working in AR and VR in terms of sort of advancing the immersive technologies and the immersive experience. Is anybody baking into the next generation of their platforms or technologies any of the other 9 senses that aren't being accommodated right now so that you can see, smell, taste, touch, feel? I mean, we're using a lot of those in neural prosthetics already. Are we adapting that for AR and VR?
Oh, definitely. No question about touch. Touch is critical. Spatial audio is critical. Critical overall for the objective of full immersion, of what we refer to as full presence. Touch, haptics, is being embedded into everything. Temperature, cold, hot, and anything in between is also critical, and there's technologies, the special technologies that we've been evaluating to integrate into the tracking. Again, the motivation is not, on the one hand, is to make the experience more immersive for the purpose of engaging the elasticity of the brain as efficiently as possible. But on the other hand, it's really about the data that we can provide to the healthcare professionals, the scientists, the analysts, the researchers. The data is the key. Is more data, more sensors, more ability for the experts to come back and say, this is how you will be able to better rehabilitate or better treat a specific patient. And AI is required, for AI to work, you really need as much data to be the more efficient is the data collection, the more useful will be the AI, machine learning, and all those tools to come and help us.
No, you had an observation also.
I just wanted to throw in that MindMaze has done some interesting work with sensors on the inside of a VR headset so that someone's facial expressions can be picked up, and when you have an avatar in a VR setting, it will actually smile, wink, do whatever it is your face is doing, which is obviously a problem without that right now.
And I ran across a company that had a 3D localized olfactory system, which I thought was incredible, to be able to have the smell come from a particular direction. I think we had a question in the back there too.
Yeah, I'm going back to your question on AI, and again, I'm no expert in AI. We do have engineering teams that specialize in that in my company, but I think from the pure medical or medical device perspective, or wearable medical devices, I think so far we've seen the wave of sensors and detections and predictions and maybe even diagnosis and analysis, but we believe that the future of AI would be actually treatment optimization. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think what you guys are already doing with AI, from what I've seen in the presentations, some of the presentations, is that you're actually changing the treatment regimen of the rehab specialist, again, according to recorded progress and so on. So again, our take is diagnostics are great, predictions are wonderful, prevention is key, but the use of AI for treatment optimization would be the next generation of, let's say, AI therapeutics, I would say. So I wonder what you take with that.
There's one thing that is critical to remember. All these amazing technologies, AI, machine learning and all, to really work and really help us, you must provide it what we call accurate and consistent data sets. The data that is being collected by the sensors cannot be the same data that you use for playing video games. It took us years and years of development to make sure that when a system is being used to collect data on a certain patient is being used in Tokyo, the same exact system will provide exactly the same set of data for the same patient if it ran it in China or in Tel Aviv or right here in this auditorium. So if you ask me from many years of looking at immersive technologies, the highest risk to all the great work that everybody is trying to do here is using off-the-shelf tracking or off-the-shelf sensing technologies without optimizing it for this critical cause and relying on that data in a way. You come from the medical device space, you have to go about developing the tools to collect the data exactly how you will go about designing a thrombectomy product and get it approved to the FDA. That's why everything we do has to be clinically and approved by the FDA, so there's no toys involved in the process.
I want to go back to Jojo Platt's question and something that you said. When we're going to be with these VR goggles on us, for example, driving this autonomous car, there will be no way to read our facial expression, our body language, because we may be having a body language that's part of the game that we are playing. In that case, it's extremely important to read the brain, because really the brain doesn't lie. The brain tells us what it is that we are feeling. Maybe we are overdoing it with the excitement or with the fear that we are creating in the game, or maybe we are becoming boring, etc., etc. Not to mention that it's going to be useful for advertisements, but let's avoid that. So one thing is really reading the brain as part of the sensors and as part of everything else to be read. And to the point of AI, of course, if we sense the body very well, then we can use AI or any other optimization treatment, and AI will be, of course, one of them, to improve treatment, to get immediate feedback, and then to see whether the treatment was useful or treatment has to be changed, modified in terms of times, in terms of quantity, in terms of the drugs or the treatment itself that has to be used.
I can tell by Lisa's body language and position that it's time to wrap
No
things up.
sensors needed for that.
But I'd like to thank our panel. Thank you for your expertise and guidance.
Thank you.